Welcome to Between the Sheets, the non-judgmental podcast where we're going to cover various sexual health and wellness topics. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie Zwonitzer. I'm a urology and sexual health nurse practitioner, and I love helping my patients and listeners discover and develop their most satisfying sexual experiences. Between the Sheets is here to normalize the conversations about sexual health and cover everything from basic anatomy to the most taboo topics and everything in between. Real talk, real pleasure, one episode at a time. So come on, let's get between the sheets. This episode is sponsored by Boston Scientific and its educational website on erectile dysfunction, edcure.com. One study estimated that more than 50% of men over the age of 40 have some degree of erectile dysfunction, which can be frustrating and confusing. Go to edcure.com to find information on erectile dysfunction and treatment options, including long-term treatment options offered by Boston Scientific. Boston Scientific does not endorse any statements or opinions expressed during this episode. Welcome back to Between the Sheets. I have Dr. Lindsey Berkson with us today. She is a distinguished hormone scholar. She works with the Center of Bioenvironmental Research, and she is just a leading, amazing figure for us in hormone research, hormone health, and we're just going to delve into how our hormones and supporting our hormones throughout our lives can help us have better intimacy. So welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for giving me an opportunity to be in on the conversation, because most people have been told that hormones are dangerous, they cause cancer, stay away from them, and they've even stopped teaching hormonal medicine in medical schools, osteopathic schools, naturopathic schools. So when you ask your own well-intentioned doctor, should I be on hormones? Hey, what's the story? You're often going to get the wrong answer. If they're not trained in it, they're going to not recommend it because it's human to be down on what you're not up on. So I'm here to help you get up on hormonal facts and separate fact from fiction.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that because you're right. The Women's Health Initiative that came out in the early 2000s really did a number, and unfortunately, there's a couple generations of women that didn't get the help that they could deserve and benefit from. And now we're kind of coming around to where the research is proving that that was wrong, and the authors of that study are coming out and saying that, it was misinterpreted and the information just wasn't accurate as far as bioidentical hormones and what is the safety profile. So I'm really excited to kind of talk about this because every day I still have patients that will say, well, it's going to cause cancer, right? No, let's talk through this. Let's make your life
It
better.
prevents cancer. It prevents
Exactly.
the reanalysis. So there were a huge prestigious group of providers, 40 prestigious groups put on the Women's Health Initiative. And it was basically put on because we're an aging nation and we didn't want to topple Medicare. So this Women's Health Initiative looked at women every which way to figure out how to keep them safer longer with the less costly meds and procedures. So they looked at women in bones, and they looked at women in lipids, and they looked at women in hormones. And the initial analysis was the scary analysis, but the estrogen-only arm never had any scary analysis. It consistently was reanalyzed over the years, and the women on estrogen, and in this case, they used oral conjugated equine estrogen or Premarin. So it was a pregnant mare's urine that they got the estrogen out of, and that's the way estrogen was given in this country for years. So that's what they used. Women on Premarin kept having less and less breast cancer. First, it was a trend. Then it became statistically significant. And then in 19, which the initial wrong analysis was in July of 2002. So in 2019, the original authors said healthy women taking estrogen for an average of 5 years have 23% decreased incidence of getting breast cancer in the first place if they do get breast cancer and they're on hormones. So you got to really take this in. You have a 44% decreased risk of dying from the disease because you often have a better playing status once you get diagnosed, because hormones are breast protective. They don't drive cancer. But that didn't, we're such a reactive country.
We are.
We're so reactive. And it's important not to get reactive because everybody else is, so you don't miss out on what's really helpful. But the second release, and I remember I was lecturing at Caesar's Palace to a group of almost 1,000 compounding pharmacists right after the reanalysis came out and said hormones prevent against cancer. They're breast
Mhm.
protective. I remember nobody there knew about this yet because it was so new. And I got up to the microphone and I said, listen to this, because part of your big business is compounding bioidentical hormones.
Mm.
Estrogen has now been found officially by the original authors to be breast protective. The entire audience jumped up to their feet. People were hugging each other. It was a moment, but it didn't get out into the news because bad
Yeah.
news, fearful news sells. Good news, protective news doesn't sell, at least in today's cultural climate. So you've really got to know who to
Mhm.
listen to because you don't want to miss out on the protection and also
Mhm.
getting turned on with life because hormones do something that nothing else does. This is the bottom line. We have in our body a Wi-Fi system where you get emails to your cells to tell your cells what to do to keep you healthy. And that Wi-Fi, if it could dig into the genes so it can get genetic messages, only hormones can dig into genes and deliver at the genetic level messages to keep your email going in your Wi-Fi. So hormones rule your physiologic Wi-Fi. And you know, if you wake up in the morning and you open up your computer, here, I'm opening up my computer, simulating, and it doesn't work, your Wi-Fi is frozen,
Mhm.
you can't get anything done. Aging and pathological states of disease are partially frozen Wi-Fi because your hormones couldn't be able to deliver their messages. We've
Mm.
just learned over the last just recent years that they don't even only deliver messages, what we used to think only to target tissues. Hormones deliver messages to the breasts, to reproductive tissues like the ovaries. Maybe they do a
Mm.
little bit more to the bones and the colon. But now we know that all hormones deliver these critical Wi-Fi emails that nobody else can deliver to every single cell membrane of the entire
Mhm.
body. All the cells that make you up take these Wi-Fi signals from hormones. So when you hit 25, the peak of your hormones, you're starting to silently lower levels. And 40, it really picks up speed. And that's why
Mhm.
most people start to need different glass prescriptions or feel like they're having some back pain or they're gaining a little tiny weight, love handles that they never had before. It really aging picks up speed as more and more Wi-Fi messages are lost, and you can reboot your Wi-Fi by going to a knowledgeable, well-trained. You can't ask your regular doctor to run hormones for you because they're so complicated and they haven't been trained in school. So you need to go to somebody who took more courses, more training, so they can serve you well and you can slow down the Mack truck of time. And since this is an intimacy show, you know, you want to be lubed in the vaginal vault, but all these Wi-Fi messages keep you more lubed from your brain to your lungs. I'm going to be 77 in a few
Wow.
months. And
You
I
look
had
amazing.
Thank you. And I had a very rough time early on because my mother
Mhm.
was given the drug that turned out I wrote one of the very first books on endocrine disruption, chemicals that
Mhm.
mess with our hormones. And I didn't know when I first started writing that book that the model compound for endocrine disruption, chemicals that futz with your hormones, was diethylstilbestrol given to pregnant women from 1938 to
Mhm.
1971 till it was banned as the most cancer-causing chemical ever invented. It was put in prenatal vitamins. It was given as shots to prevent miscarriages. And
Oh
my
my
mother had
goodness.
all of that. So early on, I had cancers. I battled blindness. It's not like I have great genes. I was born behind the eight ball, proverbially. When the December, and I had breast cancer. So people would say to you, you can never have hormones. I was putting my toe in the water because I had so many organs removed from so many of those nightmares. I had cancer twice, so
Mm.
when 2019 and that study came out, I dove into hormones, but now I know how to make sure you're getting it right and everything is balanced, and that's when my life woke up. And I now I'm very grateful. I don't mean to be in any way boisterous about it. I have tremendous gratitude because it was so rough early on. I now have the youth in my older age that I really couldn't embrace in my younger age. I just came back from
Mhm.
5 days of kayaking. I'm doing a 5-day kayaking trip in the first week of August off the Nyack coast. I mean, you can slow down aging And hormones are
Mm.
part of that recipe, not the only thing, but you got to go to somebody who's well trained in how to do it right.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, we didn't learn any of it in NP school. And I know, just working in urology, most of my colleagues have, we're looking for hormone specialists to send our patients to when they're coming to us and saying these things. And it's like, well, I know how to throw vaginal estrogen at you. But beyond that, I'm going to need to get you to a specialist because I don't know how to do all the readings and how often should they be done and all of that. So it is really important. Is there a way for our patients to find providers that have had adequate training and are quality hormone providers?
That's a great question. Really great question. So, David Brownstein and I just put on 16 hours of CMEs for medical doctors, nurse practitioners, naturopaths. We didn't get CMEs for compounding pharmacists, but we're working on it. And we had almost 300 doctors, mostly OBGYNs and urologists, who all
Mhm.
said they knew nothing about hormones. And we have a directory at my website of the people who graduated, and it's
Okay.
drlindseyberkson.com. There's a directory right there. And then I also work a lot with another teaching program, and there's several of them, and I'm going to mention, called BHRT. And you can go to BHRT, Bioidentical Hormone Training Academy. They have a directory of everyone who's graduated from there. And I work a lot with training those doctors quite a bit. And then David Rosensweet, who was one of my doctors when I had breast cancer 31 years ago. We became friends because it's a long story, but he was very helpful in allowing me to do the care that I wanted to get in Santa Fe, New Mexico at the time. I'm in Texas right now. I'm
Mhm.
in Austin. And he now is in hormones and I'm in hormones. And he's got a wonderful program called the menopause method. And he really
Mm.
knows how to train people. So I know that those three training programs, because there's a lot of mixed messages, even from gynecologists on Instagram going, I'm a gynecologist with 30 years experience. You could still get a lot of misinformation. So I'd be glad to just do some bullet points of some misinformation and ways that how do you know to get a good doc and how you know in your
Yeah.
blood work that your hormones are working for you. This is something that most providers don't know if that's helpful for you to. And by the way, I
Yeah,
love
that's
nurse
very helpful.
practitioners. Love, 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 love,
Thank
love,
you.
love, love. One of my best friends is a nurse practitioner.
That's great. Yeah, it's been a great field for me and getting into urology. I had no idea what I was getting into when I got into urology and I have fallen in love with it, especially the sexual medicine side of it. But it's fascinating how much, especially the estrogen for me, because I deal with a lot of I deal with both men and women, but the women who are coming in their 50s and 60s and complaining of new onset of frequency and urgency and irritation and all of these things that unless you know to associate them with the decrease in estrogen, you're treating them for overactive bladder. You're treating them for, sending them to pelvic floor physical therapy, which is always a good idea. But, you're missing the mark because you get these ladies on their hormone replacement therapy and their bladder wall gets thicker again, their vaginal tissue gets healthier again. And all those other symptoms stop. And they don't need the oxybutanins and the other medications for overactive bladder and things like that. So it's become such a passion of mine to learn more about this because I think we are doing a disservice to our patients by putting a band-aid on these symptoms that aren't getting to the root cause of the issue.
Well said. Well said. I very much appreciated that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, talk to me in relationship to, the intimacy. Let's focus on women for now. And what are we looking at if they have low libido, pain with sex, they're having decreased lubrication? I send them to a hormone specialist. I found them off of your website, your list of graduates, sending them to this specialist. What are they going to expect? What are they going to be tested for? What are some of the suggestions they're going to get? Kind of talk me through that.
So there are, no matter how much you love the Dutch test or the urine test or whatever, you got to do some tests in the blood. Tests you got to do in the blood. And it's the same way for men. There's levels that so there's two aspects of aging. One, your sex steroid hormones are going down. So you're not getting your email and your Wi-Fi is frozen. And concurrently, your follicle stimulating hormone in both women and men is elevating. And FSH rising causes the same things that estrogen lowering causes or
Mm.
testosterone lowering. So FSH elevation causes you can't burn off that weight around your waist. It makes your brown fat dysfunctional. You have brain fog. It makes you not think well. You have bone thinning, all the same, and you have vaginal vault dryness. So, one of the first things you want to know once you start on hormone replacement, what is your starting FSH? Where are you at? And
Okay.
you have a goal. If you're on the right amount of estrogen, you bring that FSH under 25. Keep my FSH. What really made me, once the women's reanalysis came out and I was able to not only go start low and go slow, which has been the mantra of hormone experts and teaching in many of these certification classes, which all made a lot of sense. But you don't want to go too slow. You want to go high enough to bring that FSH if you at younger levels. You want to turn your physiology back to where it was when you were younger. So a lot of doctors that don't know anything about hormones, you'll ask your GP or, your doc, can you please do hormones? They'll look at the range at your age and say your hormones are okay for your age. You don't want your hormones okay for your age. I want my hormones okay for my 25, 30-year-old age. That's what I want. So you want to bring your FSH down. And that is so important because if you're on hormones and you say, I'm just not getting any benefit or I don't really
Mhm.
feel well, you got to check your FSH. A lot of women come in, it's 95, 135. You're not getting any benefit from that hormone. You're not on the
Mm.
right hormone. But all hormones are a family and they
Okay.
function and dysfunction together. So it's hard to get your sex hormones straight if your thyroid is out of balance or your insulin
Okay.
is out of balance or even your oxytocin. So really a well-trained doctor looks at all of your hormones at the same
Mhm.
time and also looks at binding proteins in your blood because
Mm.
hormones travel in Ubers. They cannot go from A to Z by themselves. They must hire an Uber, get inside, and the Uber must take them to where they're going to go. And that Uber is called binding protein. Estrogen and
Mhm.
testosterone sit on sex hormone binding globulin. And as we age, it elevates, and the door in the Uber won't open up. And
Mm.
estrogen and testosterone can't get out to deliver their signal. So a good doctor knows where the sex hormone binding globulin is. And if it's too high, helps bring it down to a normal range where it's not a problem and that door isn't stuck on
Mm.
the Uber. And there's also nutrients and hormones depend intimately on nutrients.
Okay.
Hormones can't deliver their signal without vitamin A, the active form of pyridoxine hydrochloride, which is a pyridoxal 5 phosphate, P5P,
Mhm.
needs magnesium, vitamin A, zinc. Zinc pulls the hormone out of the Uber and sets it on
Okay.
the cell membrane or into a target tissue. If you don't digest well, if your biome is off, so in my initial intake
Mhm.
with a patient, I'll do a pH of their morning urine, a pH of their vaginal pH, which should be
Mm.
like 2.54. It should be low, not really high. Many women come in with a real alkaline pH. Their
Mhm.
biomes are all off, their digestion is all off. Then they go on hormones and they don't get a great response. So, hormones, you have to look at the patient functionally. Are they
Mhm.
eating a good diet, back to the basics? Are they digesting that good diet? Are their pHs and their biomes pretty healthy? And do they
Mhm.
have all these nutrients? And then do they have FSH coming down and the right hormones going up and all of the hormones being addressed? So you can see this is a tapestry of
Yeah.
events.
Yeah, it really is.
It is. So you just want somebody trained in it. There are people, but I've been trying so hard to train more and more. In fact, this coming year,
Mhm.
I have 2 conferences coming up. One is gonna be called Everything Breast Cancer in High-Risk Patients, and it's about hormones for women who've had hormonally driven cancers
Mhm.
and also high-risk patients like genetic clotting disorders. Can they take
Okay.
hormones? Can they not take hormones? And how do you do it safely if they can take hormones? And then the
Mm.
other and that's gonna be for CMEs, 16 hours of
Mhm.
CMEs online. And then the next
Awesome.
class is gonna be everything gut, and I'm teaching it with
Mm.
a functional gastroenterologist, Dr. Sam
Mhm.
Rabar from Beverly Hills, and Jill Carnahan, who is, of course, one of the biggies in our world in the gut. And she and I used to lecture together all the time, and same with Dr. Sam. So we're coming together to do that. And then we're going to we still have everything hormones online. So if people wanted to take that, it's still available for one more year of 16 hours of CMEs online with 11 hours of non-CME and lots of bonus materials also. So we just keep trying to educate. And the gut is
Yeah.
part of it. That's why we're having the gut. And a lot of breast
Yeah.
cancer patients are denied hormones when they shouldn't be denied hormones. It
Mhm.
doesn't mean everybody can take hormones, but women who are
Yeah.
triple negative that have no receptors, why can't they take hormones? And there's really no research that shows that if you give hormones to a breast cancer patient, she's more at risk of recurrence. There isn't.
Mm.
There's
Yeah.
one study that they lean on. They say the
Okay.
Women's Health Initiative, but it turned out that said estrogen was safe, but for healthy women. They didn't test breast cancer patients in that
Yeah.
study. The Million study sounds like it was great. It was a survey. It was just a little survey that wasn't even to have well follow-up, and they
Yeah.
badmouthed hormones, and they make it sounds really big, the Million survey. But we had the largest study that ever came out ever on hormones from our own government, our NIH, in April of last year. And it was really called the 10 Million study. They looked at 10 million American women on Medicare who was on
Mhm.
hormones and how long did they live, what issues did they get, and what protection did they get. And that 10 million women, they looked at their
Mm.
medical charts because they were all Medicare patients. They're all being covered by the government. And the women on estrogens, all of them had less breast cancer. The women with
Mm.
heart disease, they had 31 supportive studies. Congestive failure, AFib, they're all denied hormones, right? Because they're cardiac
Yeah.
patients. All of those women with cardiac issues on hormones live longer and
Mm.
they had less neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's disease.
Mm.
They lived 19% longer. That's almost
Wow.
25% longer. And it was extraordinary. That's what opened up the door again for hormones
Yeah.
and they didn't name it the 10 million study. It was called Postmenopausal Women on Long-Term Hormones, but it was on 10 million women. I'm calling it the
Yeah.
10 million study. The largest study ever run. Definitively,
Yeah.
this said women on hormones, even older women, even women with heart issues
Mhm.
that take hormones have less heart attacks, less stroke, live longer, less fractures, less colorectal cancer, less Alzheimer's disease. So we got to educate practitioners because they're telling
Yeah.
women it causes cancer when it was
Right.
statistically protective against three cancers: breast cancer, lung cancer, colorectal cancer, and a
Mm.
trend at 7 million 2 years earlier when it first come out in peer review before it was officially peer reviewed.
Yeah.
It said that it protected against 5 cancers. When they went to 10 million women, it became a trend for 2 other cancers, which were, I can't remember them right now, but basically it protected against all the cancers
Yeah.
tested. 3 were statistically significant and 2 were a trend. And at
Mm.
7 million, that what all 5 were statistically significant. So hormones don't cause cancer. They
Yeah.
protect against it. And the one study that everyone has says, hey, women on hormones get an increased risk of women with breast cancer on hormones
Mhm.
get an increased risk of recurrence was the habit study. That's the
Mm.
study that everyone looks at. Very few people read the literature. Very few
Yeah.
people read studies, and most people read the abstracts, which are the
Yep.
summaries, which often don't even really reflect what happened in the study, but what the
Right.
author wants you to think happened in the study. So in the habit study, the women that had a recurrence, there was a group of women that took estrogen that did have a recurrence of cancer, but they were all the women in the tamoxifen group that were on estrogen
Mm.
blockers. So even though they took estrogen, they couldn't
They
get
weren't
any
good.
they didn't get any
Mhm.
emails from estrogen.
Yeah.
Estrogen emails were frozen. So
Yeah.
there's 26 studies that were run
Mm.
from 1980s to 2006, 2008 at mostly prestigious institutions, D. Anderson, University of Wisconsin, Georgia University, where they took women with ER-positive
Mhm.
breast cancer, mild and moderate cases, not stage 3 and stage 4, and they gave them estrogen, and they had matched cohorts with women with
Mhm.
similar tumor size, similar age, with no estrogen. And the shortest study was 2 years. The longest was 36 years. The average was about 20 years. These were long-term studies. There's
Yeah.
26 of them. At every single study, the women with breast cancer on hormones had less recurrence, less death if they had recurrence, and higher quality of life. And Abraham Morgentaler says the same exact thing for men with testosterone. But if you're
Yeah.
on testosterone and you get prostate cancer, they blame the testosterone for causing it when in actuality it gives, in most cases, nothing's 100%,
Mhm.
gives you a better playing tumor and better. He and I have lectured together. He was on my podcast and he's in the
Mhm.
same, he's trying to say the same exact message for
Yeah.
gentlemen as we're saying.
Yeah, and it is really interesting because, I treat prostate cancer, I treat hypogonadism in men, and it's one of the things that we were taught to talk to them about is that if you're on testosterone replacement, it can encourage a prostate cancer growth. Not that it would cause it, but if you had one, it could make it grow faster and stronger and all these things. And we're finding out that the opposite is actually true.
He goes, so I lectured with him in Miami at the Trump, Royale Hotel. They were taken when I went there at the time, Trump had just lost, I guess, the election, and they were taking down the words Trump and just leaving it Royale Hotel. It was funny. It was a beautiful hotel, and he was lecturing and I was lecturing, and he was saying that this bad name of testosterone is based on a gentleman who won the Nobel Prize for it, and he said it was based on 3 cases, only 3 cases, and he ripped those 3 cases to shreds, of which I could not repeat, but I do have a podcast. You can go to my website and hear him reiterate this of how it was wrong, and, he ended up opening up the men's clinic in Boston, which was one of the initial testosterone replacement clinics in the world, and he just retired recently and does a little bit of, consulting, kind of like I do. I consult a lot with breast cancer and very extreme hormonal cases now and mostly teach, but I take on maybe 5 to 6 cases a week and spend about 2 hours with them. A real deep dive for people that are really fighting for their lives and things, and he does that, and but not as a primary care, just as a consultant, and he's doing the same thing now for men. But he shows how all this was based on a tower of clouds, and so much we get led astray, and the problem is we lose out.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many patients that could benefit from hormone therapy, both men and women, who are too afraid to. And I love having these conversations with you and other providers because it needs to be out there. Like you said, the media globbed onto the negative study and really hasn't told us how great it is. And that original, scare was really just that. It was a scare. It wasn't done correctly. The analysis, needed to be revisited and looked at, more appropriately. And I think that it's so important for all of us as providers, whether you specialize in hormone or not, to understand that we need our patients to learn about their hormones. And even if I can't provide that service, to get them into the right hands because it's life altering. I talk a lot about sex because that's what I do, but it affects your entire body. Like you said, it decreases your risk of Alzheimer's. It improves, your cancer risk. There's your heart disease. I got diagnosed with high blood pressure, crazy high blood pressure, like 170 over 110, and I was 37 years old. That's ridiculous. Obviously, my hormones were playing a part in that, and I need to have that. No one said, "Hey, on top of getting you on some blood pressure medicine because we need to get this down now, let's check your hormones and see where those are at." Nobody thought to do that. But had I had a hormone specialist or a holistic provider, functional medicine provider, maybe they would have. And maybe I would have gotten some benefit out of that in addition to my heart medications and things. So I just really appreciate the conversation and how we can go about helping more patients to get this. So in relationship to, the sexual health, and I talk to my guys and I tell them, erectile dysfunction, for example, is multifactorial. Just because we get you on some testosterone doesn't mean you're automatically going to start getting erections when the wind blows like you did when you were 20. But it helps. Same thing with women. If we give you, estrogen, progesterone, whatever, and kind of start to balance out your hormones, it might not be a perfect fit, but it will get you there. But it definitely benefits. You're going to have better lubrication for sex and things like that. So, what should our ladies and I guess our guys too focus on? What symptoms are they seeing when they go, I need to go talk to somebody about my hormones because my life is not optimized right now?
Well, because the planet is encased in a cloud of endocrine disrupting chemicals that are in our air, food, and water, there's almost nobody that's not affected. And endocrine disrupting compounds have been found in many studies. I talk in my book, Hormone Deception, I talk about the study 25 years ago at Cedar Sinai, where they did analysis of amniotic fluid of healthy pregnant women, and there were
Mhm.
hundreds of chemicals in there. So no one is in a Seinfeldian bubble, like a bubble boy on the
Yeah.
Seinfeld episode. We are not protected from these chemicals. So we now, many of us don't have enough hormones early on in life, much earlier than perimenopause and menopause and
Mhm.
andropause. So I always think hormones. We now have younger women not having enough estrogen. We have young men that aren't looking for super orgasms. The young men in their 20s have levels of testosterone like old 60-year-old men. There's a trend where lower testosterone in men and higher sex hormone binding globulin, or that Uber. So you can't use the hormone that you've got, and you can't go to a doctor who only orders total testosterone. They also have to run the free testosterone. I see that a lot because a lot of women will be high in total testosterone, but insufficient in free. So they're misdiagnosed out of the chute. But we have young women, 17, 18, 19 years old, that don't have enough hormones. In fact, Harvard and General Mass published in the last 2 years that spun off out of this randomized trial that went on for a year and a half of young women that had a variety of symptoms. These are women 13 old to 24 years old, young women. And
Yeah.
these women had anxiety, because not enough hormones, you get anxiety. Hormones calm you. My last book was called Sexy Brain because steroid hormones rule the brain. You don't have good hormone balance, your brain is out of balance. Women who are anorexic, women who have eating disorders, body dysphoria, excessive athleticism, because everyone's supposed to look thin. That's almost emaciated actresses. I love Nicole Kidman. I love her. I just saw her walking down a red carpet a few days ago, and she looked like she came out of Auschwitz. I mean, that's everyone wants to be thin. So people and women on birth control. Birth control became over the counter in July of 2023, and birth control pills turn off your hormones. They turn
Yeah.
off your hormones. You get osteoporosis really earlier. You get poor decision making. You can't think because hormones rule your brain. So we got to start looking at hormones now. I say once every decade you got to be tested. But in this study, they found of all these women, young girls with all these issues, all had insufficient estrogen and
Mm.
progesterone. So they gave
Fascinating.
patches to this 13 to 24-year-old girls, half of them. It was a randomized trial.
Mm.
Half of these girls got patches like you give a 60-year-old woman, an estrogen patch. And then they gave progesterone different ways because there were multi-centers. The different centers gave it in different forms. And half the women got placebo patches. And the
Mm.
women, the young girls on hormones, got rid of their symptoms in like 1 to 2 to 3 weeks. No anxiety, no body dysphoria. Which body am I in? Because
Yeah.
hormones are out of balance. You don't feel balanced in your body. And God, maybe somebody at school is telling you that's because you should be a different sex. Many of these problems went away. And at the end of the study, the women on the hormones didn't want to go off the hormones. And now they've
Mm.
been spinning off quite a number of papers on this. And these were 13, 24-year-olds. So the moral of that Harvard General Mass story is
Mm.
that our world is polluted. So
Yeah.
we got to look at things differently. Our reproductive milestones are different. Everything's different. So you have to always think hormones. But young men, we used to call it in my day, excuse my language here, we used to call an erection a woody. But
Yeah.
most young men don't get it hard like that. They don't get like a woody
Right.
anymore because
Right.
there's microplastics, which are estrogenic, and they're sitting so much. Most people are mushy. If you don't have muscles, all these things are adding up where the hormones aren't working well. So you've always got to consider it. But the biggest issue is hormones rule your brain. So if you find you're really anxious, you can't sleep, and somebody's telling you you need to be on SSRIs or things like that, you should look at your hormones and see where
Yeah.
your hormones are at. And also, hormones help. You should look at your FSH. We're seeing young girls with FSHs like old women. And so you got to do hormone evaluation just like you would normally do in
Yeah.
a older woman. Always
Yeah.
keep it in mind. So if things aren't working right the way you want them to work, it doesn't mean 100% they're your hormones. You could have something else
Yeah.
going on, but you should now in the differential diagnosis, meaning all the
Yeah.
possible causations, you should
Right.
have somebody that knows what they're doing. You can't ask this of
Yeah.
just a regular, or you'll go down a rabbit hole. you got to get your
Yeah.
hormones evaluated.
Yeah, it's such great advice because, we call them the sex hormones, but like you said, they're throughout our entire body. They go on all of these different symptoms. So, yeah, something that doesn't seem sex hormone related still
Right.
can be because we have receptors all over our body for these hormones. And they truly affect so many areas, not just sex.
It's incredible. For example, just a small example, you have progesterone receptors all over your lungs.
Hmm.
So, progesterone helps heal and repair lungs. And progesterone is made in a young person in 6 areas of the brain to
Hmm.
heal and repair your brain. So, after brain trauma, after an accident, after a stroke, large doses of progesterone are extremely brain healing. You could use it as a
Hmm.
tool. Women
Yeah.
with men and women, and men and women both, you can give progesterone to men too.
Yeah.
In multiple sclerosis, where they have white lesions in the brain that cause various problems, large doses of progesterone shrink those brain
Mhm.
infarct areas, and progesterone promotes myelin production, which is lost in MS, and it remyelinates. So when you go on
Wow.
progesterone, it helps protect the insulation of your nerves. But this is so powerful that's Cedar Sinai again during COVID. They noticed that women got COVID more than men, but they died less if they were premenopausal or if they were postmenopausal on hormones. But
Huh.
older women with no hormones, they died the same way that men did. They did a real landmark study where in the ICU, men that had really severe COVID, they gave standard care to two groups of men, but half of the group got 100 milligrams IM, a shot of COVID in the muscle twice a day. That's the only difference. And those guys got out of the hospital faster. They didn't have the ground glass lung appearance. They didn't have that
Yep.
damage to their lungs seen on imaging. And they
Hmm.
basically needed less medication and did better. So you can, as a provider, someone with chronic or recurrent pneumonia, somebody with asthma, you can give progesterone
Yeah.
to, it helps the lungs. So you can use hormones beyond the regular sexual thing, but it's always great to keep your sex life alive since intimacy is the glue in relationships. And we've gotten so glued to our screens and so low
Mhm.
in our hormones and so high in our uber binding proteins that we have less and less intimacy. And this has been proven now by different studies. And yet, intimacy is part of the drive for life and to enjoy life. And
Yeah.
and a really smart provider can even figure out how to really thicken that vaginal wall, that layer of cells,
Mhm.
and how to really make you enjoy, because a lot of women say I don't feel like it hurts, it bleeds, I don't want it anymore. I don't need it. I'm
Mhm.
older. I'll just age naturally. And it's a shame because they miss out on a lot of the true joy of life. Even if you're not
Yeah.
married, there's no reason. I'm still dating and having an
Yes.
extremely active sexual life.
Good. That's fabulous. I love that. This has been a fabulous conversation. I mean, so basically the end of the day, the main idea here is if things are off, regardless of what it is, make sure that part of your workup is getting your hormones checked and getting in with a provider who understands hormones and can help see if that is also contributing to your issue.
Well said.
Yeah, good. So in the show notes, we will put how everyone can get in touch with you and the resources that you have. I'm so grateful for you being here. I think we could talk all day on hormones, but I'm really glad for this overview with you and getting this information out to our patients that hormones are safe. You just need the right person to be helping you through this journey.
I just want to tell you one more thing, if you don't mind. I have my brand
Yeah.
new book, my 22nd book, coming out
Awesome.
in September called Oxytocin Medicine. And it's all about the love hormone, which is really the birth hormone, the first hormone of life that flushes the mother's body, flushes the mother's milk, flushes the baby, and that hormone is under attack from pollution. And I talk about how that might be contributing to school shootings and what's going on, and how do you look at it in different conditions because you have oxytocin emails that run so many different systems of the body, for example, like blood sugar. So we use a lot of oxytocin in diabetic patients. So
Mm.
that book is on that. And that I also have products that help hormones work better because
Yeah.
pollutants will sit in receptors or in cell membranes and not allow the emails to be sent, even if they're trying to be sent. So I have a receptor detox, which you could do detox weekends, and I have hormone balance and protect. I'm not going to go into any more in depth, but I've created
Yeah.
products because I worked with at Tulane. I was working at an estrogen, I call it a think tank. It was called the
Yeah.
Center for you mentioned it in the openings, Bioenvironmental Research at Tulane. And I worked with Elwood Jensen that discovered the first receptor and Yanaki Gustafson who discovered the second receptor. And they would all say the hormone level is not the end all be all. It's if the
Yeah.
receptor can receive it and then shimmy in
Mm.
space and deliver the message. But most receptors today are clogged with chemicals. So you got to
Okay.
have something to brush off the receptors and then
Yep.
have all the nutrients and make them work. And that another product that keeps the Uber level, keeps cancer stem cells level, and a lot of other things. So I just wanted to present those.
Yes.
They're
Thank you. We'll
on
put
my
links for that
website.
too.
So,
Yeah.
my whole life has been ruined by hormones. That drug my mother was given, diethylstilbestrol, was, ruination on hormones. And then it's been saved by hormones. And so it's kind of, I have a fire in my belly to share this because I had so much suffering and illness. And now I have so much supreme wellness. And it's available really at almost any age. You're never too old to start hormones. You can start hormones in your 90s, but only if you work with somebody who really knows how to do that safely. So I think that's a kind of a mantra message from today.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much for being here and for your wealth of knowledge. I'm just so grateful for you. And absolutely, we will put links to everything in the show notes so people can find you and your products. And I will certainly be getting that book in September for sure. So
And
thank you so
just to
much.
let you one other thing, my staff
Mhm.
will yell at me if I don't say this. So we also gave a course for people on how to find a good provider and what exactly you should look for. And it's called V to V, vilified to vindicated. Estrogen was bad and now she's better. So it's V to V, and that's for the public. And we've also got that available, not just the
Okay.
course for providers. We've got that available for the public so that they have a little bit more firm ground under their feet to figure out how to
Yeah.
proceed with this.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay.
Awesome. Great resources. Thank you so much for being here. Have a great day, everybody, and go have some fun between the sheets.
Thank you for joining us and exploring sexual health topics here on Between the Sheets. New episodes are available every Wednesday. Please subscribe and rate our podcast so we can reach more listeners. And don't forget to tell your friends, partners, and anyone who will listen about Between the Sheets. Send any comments, questions, or stories to podcastbetweenthesheets@gmail.com. It's all one word, podcastbetweenthesheets@gmail.com. Thanks for listening and go have some fun between the sheets.